If you are a regular consumer of apologetics content online, you've likely noticed that the vast majority of apologists are philosophers. This is true of Catholic apologists, Protestant apologists, prominent atheists, and on down the line. And don't get me wrong, philosophy is great. However, it is absolutely true that this philosophy background trickles into the way that apologetics arguments are made. Philosophical arguments, such as the cosmological or contingency arguments for God, where arguments are either all or nothing, are given the highest weight. This isn't necessarily a problem either. In fact, philosophy generally provides the best framework to make arguments. However, when it comes to interpreting these arguments, for us the consumers, it can leave a few blind spots or create some problems. For example, there are a large number of issues in Catholic apologetics where the Protestant says, I only have Scripture, and it leads to conclusion X. And the Catholic says, I think that Scripture is unclear, and the Magisterium confirms that the truth is conclusion Y. Then the two sides talk past each other and nobody makes any progress. But that's a topic for a future video. It's at this point, the analysis of the arguments, where I contend that a statistical mindset is crucial. That's where we get to the star of today's video, Thomas Bayes. Few people, even most statisticians, realize that Bayesian probability was invented as a way to evaluate evidence in order to refute prominent atheist philosopher David Hume. When one of the most prominent statistical theories was created with apologetics in mind, I'd say that's worth taking into account. And to be clear, this video is not a tutorial on how to do computations with Bayesian probability. There are already plenty of good ones on this site. Instead, what I want to outline is some of the conceptual basics and how they interact with how all of us evaluate apologetic arguments. So the basic premise of Bayesian probability is that we are trying to calculate the probability of something being true or false based upon the evidence that we already have, and particularly upon each individual piece of evidence that we get. The question that we are trying to answer is, if conclusion X is true or false, what is the probability that we would see this particular piece of evidence? So an example would be, say we have the question, is the sky blue? We can look at the three different types of evidence. My first grade teacher taught me that the sky is blue. A spectrometer determined that the sky emits blue light, and I saw that the sky is blue yesterday. And we can figure out pretty quickly that the sky is very likely blue. The nice thing about this is that we could include any type of evidence, such as a philosophical argument, a scientific one, or some sort of experiential evidence. So if we take the question, does God exist, we can include the variety of different types of evidence. We can evaluate the contingency argument from philosophy. We can evaluate the fine-tuning argument from science. And we can evaluate arguments from experience, all in the same way. Now, to be clear, the probabilities that you put in are, to some degree, subjective. Some people might weigh certain evidence more heavily than others. But what this does is it gives us a good framework through which to evaluate these questions. And it particularly gives us a good way to evaluate whether our own views are in line with our opinions based upon the information that we've observed and the arguments that we have considered. It also gives us a clear way to evaluate every piece of evidence or every apologetic argument that we come across. If God does not exist, what is the likelihood that we see the fine-tuning of the universe? If God does exist, what is the probability that we see evil in the world? If Christ rose from the dead, what is the probability that I have not experienced or seen a miracle? And so on until we run through all of the arguments about these key big questions. This can help us avoid some of the common pitfalls, such as thinking that some argument is really crushing before realizing that it actually wouldn't be unexpected if we granted our opponent's premises. And it can also help us to hone in on arguments that are really important. I appreciate everyone who watched this video. I'm a statistician myself, and I think that having this sort of framework is very important to being able to journey through the apologetics landscape. And I also thought that if or when I make future videos about some of these questions, it would be helpful to have an explainer like this for how I'm approaching them. So thank you for watching, and God bless you all.